I thought that I saw a white figure that shone, and did not grow dim like the others. Was that Glorfindel, then? Yes, you saw him for a moment as he is upon the other side, one of the mighty of the Firstborn. He is an elf lord of a house of princes. Indeed, there is a power in Rivendell to withstand the might of Mordor, for a while, and elsewhere other powers still dwell. Hey everyone, Yoiston here, and I hope you all are doing well, wherever you are in Middle-earth. Today I want to take some time to explore why Glorfindel is as hyped up by the Tolkien community as he is, and why he is as powerful as he is. For his full epic character history, please check out my other video on him. Sources for today's video are in the description and cards. My friends, thank you all so much for joining me today. Let's begin our tale. As we know, Glorfindel was a high elf, and assuming that he was definitely the same Glorfindel from the First Age, reincarnated and sent back to Middle-earth in the Second Age, which is a safe assumption, we know quite a bit about him from that backstory. He was a lord of a great house in the First Age, the House of the Golden Flower of Gondolin. We know that there were 12 great houses of the Elves of Gondolin, encompassing the kindreds of the elves that lived there. Since he was the chief of one of those houses, and if these 12 houses made up all of the Elves of Gondolin, at least for the most part, we can assume that Glorfindel is already one of the top 12 elves in Gondolin in terms of power and valor already, which is already saying a lot. Furthermore, we know that he was a lord of Gondolin, but was not born there. He was born in Valinor, and was a true high elf, taking in some of the light of the two trees of Valinor before their destruction, and would carry their power and memory into Middle-earth with him. We know nothing of his lineage, and to be honest, perhaps some of his power comes from that, and if we did know who his parents were, maybe that would give us more of an explanation. Maybe he had some blood of the Vanyar, and was in some way related to some noble elves, giving him that greater strength. Regardless, he would follow Turgon, alongside Ecthelion, and aid in all of Turgon's endeavors, thus probably making him one of Gondolin's greatest soldiers overall, at least tied with Ecthelion, and maybe Turgon. Finally, he had a virtuous and noble heart, and would give his light to save the lives of the refugees of Gondolin from a Balrog, whom he would be slain by in order to kill during the fall of Gondolin. So, even before his reincarnation, we have a high elf who had power from Valinor, a noble and willing heart with wisdom inside of it, someone who was innately one of the greatest soldiers of Gondolin, and one whose power was already enough to slay a Balrog, before we even look into him in the Third Age. Now, to be honest, we don't have every detail here to show why he would be able to slay a Balrog when many other elves would certainly fail in that task. We don't know what sort of training he underwent to make him different in kind to other elves during the Elder Days, so I must assume that he was just innately more talented and gifted in many of his abilities and skills than even many other high elves. Perhaps he was born into that particular family with innate power, or he was just of a different stock than other elves. But even in the First Age, he not only offered a power that was unlike most other elves, but also a sort of valor and virtue that set him apart from many other peoples throughout the history of Middle-earth. Now, let's go on. After his death, he went to the halls of Mandos, and like Finrod Felagund before him, the Valar would judge his deeds in life as most worthy, and would craft for him a new body for reincarnation sooner than most other elves, sending him back to Middle-earth in the Second Age. Perhaps it was with additional time in Valinor, or with the creation of a new body by the Valar, to reward his deeds from the Elder Days that he continued to have such immense power, not quite that of Galadriel, daughter of Finarfin and the granddaughter of Finwë, but close, probably more along the lines of Gil-galad, and maybe Elrond, Círdan, and Celeborn, yet I think he was even stronger than they were. Yet, despite all of his power, an interesting part about Glorfindel is how little he was utilized in the story. He certainly could have been the strongest warrior in all of the hosts of the elves in pretty much every war, but kind of like Galadriel, he and his power were really only utilized at particular and specific points in the history of Middle-earth. Perhaps he did play some role in every elven conflict from the Second Age through the early Fourth Age, but if he did, we know little, close to nothing about most of it, other than the role he played against the Witch King in the Angmar War at Fornost. To be honest, Glorfindel and other characters present an interesting tangent regarding power and the act of valor in Tolkien's works. We see that the most powerful and good characters, from Gandalf to Galadriel to Glorfindel to Aragorn to even the hobbits, are shown to be at their most powerful and good or valiant both when they emerge in the narrative at very specific points with a full display of their power, before in a way retreating back into the penumbras and shadows within their character. Characters arise, offer their light, and show their power over fate and so forth, showing powerful moments, but usually then we see them retreat back into their narrative roles afterwards generally, rather than staying like that in that particular moment. For instance, we get this with Gandalf during his battle with the Balrog, or his reawakening of Theoden, where he uncloaks his greater potential as a Maya for only but a moment, before becoming once more simply Gandalf. He does not remain in that state of fully powerful Maya, but rather he only does for a time when it's necessary. With Aragorn, we see that maybe with his Oathbreakers and so forth, but at other times, he can even just assume the mantle of Strider once again. Glorfindel, unlike many other elves such as Elrond, was considered to be a potential member of the Fellowship of the Ring, yet he was declined as his raw power could not be easily cloaked, like Gandalf's was in the form of his old man. Even though Glorfindel, in this part of the story, really showed his power and his goodness and his virtue, he didn't really have the option to hide it, even though the narrative never highlights it again in the same way. So with him it's a bit different, but it still shows that archetype. Glorfindel really only had one mode, which was full power, on switch, all of the time, and he could not easily cloak it. What is fascinating here too is that a Maya could more easily cloak his power than a High Elf could, even though Maiar are more extremely powerful overall. So on one hand, we see that the archetype of strength and valor in Glorfindel acts in a different way, but it's still there, as he reveals his full power on full blast when chasing the Nazgul who were chasing Frodo. Yet we also see that other revelation as well, that he could not as easily hide his power. He was like a lamp without a shade, always. To be honest, I'm not quite sure why that is, other than the idea that his raw power maybe came from his past in Valinor, maybe his blessings from the Valar for his deeds in his first life as well, but in this case, such a light, such a bright light, acted as a hindrance for him against the Dark Lord. So, what did he do instead during the War of the Ring? To be honest, I have no idea. I don't know if he used that power much at all against Sauron, which might hint at a bigger question I have about the Legendarium. If Elrond, Arwen, Galadriel, Celeborn, Círdan, Glorfindel, and so forth were so powerful, and they definitely were, we know that, why did they not play a far more active role against Sauron in the War of the Ring? Why didn't they go to the front lines if they couldn't be stealthy? There are some answers we could look at, elven diminishment and gifting the world and its problems to men, but I think that's a video topic for another day. My friend Robert over at In Deep Geek made a video on why Glorfindel did not join the Fellowship of the Ring recently, so shout out to him. I'll link his video in the description and cards, so please check that out. But I think Glorfindel's power was just so strong because he was naturally a powerful High Elf of the Elder Days, blessed by the light of Valinor, re-blessed by the Valar in his rebirth to retain the skills and power he had in the Elder Days based on his virtue. That in a way he just acted as a cool cameo from Tolkien's other stories from the Silmarillion in The Lord of the Rings, and his presence in the world during the time of the War of the Ring contributes to a bit of a potential plot hole in The Lord of the Rings concerning why the most powerful characters in the world did not do more to combat Sauron, but there are also potential answers to that out there as well. Overall, I used to think Glorfindel was a bit of an unsung, unknown character, maybe underappreciated person within the Legendarium, yet I actually think most people in the community see and admire how cool he is, even in his small role during the events of The Lord of the Rings, but there is not much explanation as to why he's as strong as he is, to where a Maya could go on an adventure that he couldn't go on. Much of it was his past innate power and skill, which must have come from his time in the Elder Days, both in Valinor and Beleriand, that must have remained with him in his reincarnation, even as the world declined in a lot of those types of powers as well as his natural skill and talent from unknown sources. Perhaps it was some of that unknown lineage as well, but we'll never really know. And so, my friends, with those ideas explored, we come to the end of our tale. From Glorfindel's power, we see that there are always apt opportunities to offer our light to the world, and we should not be afraid to do so. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope you all found this inquisitive exploration of Glorfindel interesting. If you did, please be sure to hit that like button and share this with a friend. What are your thoughts on Glorfindel's power? Let me know in the comments below. I'm really hoping that at some point maybe we have more of an answer about Glorfindel from the book lore or from Tolkien's notes or letters. If you'd like to support the channel, please consider getting some candles from our friends Mythologie Candles, or order some Weta or United Cutlery, Lord of the Rings sword statues, and other replicas from Castle Kon, who does international shipping, and use the code WEST at checkout. And please check out our merch and Patreon. Thanks to our Valar tier patrons and YouTube members, Peter Shepard, Blair Scout and Merton, John Hume, Elizabeth Calvert, Maz Gibbs, Reese Jenkins, Arthur, Merlin, Dale Davis, Kingswild Project, Robert Bogue, Theodore, and Moon Viper. Thank you all so much to all of our patrons and YouTube members. Please subscribe and hit that bell button to join the Men of the West and all of the Free Peoples today. And I'll see you all again next week with a video on Umbar. My friends, thank you all so much for joining me on this adventure. Until the next one.